Coming up next is a panel discussion on nuts and bolts managing the transition. I would like to invite Nabil Khan, editor at ET Auto, to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Nabil.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second panel discussion at ET Auto EV Conclave 2022. Nut bolts managing the transition. This is a very pertinent subject looking at the dynamic situation prevailing in the supply chain space. To discuss this important subject, as you see on the screen, we have a very illustrious and global industry leaders and experts who are going to discuss this subject. Let me introduce the panel that we have on the screen today. Mr. Dharmesh Arora, he is Chief Executive Officer, Asia Pacific region at Schaeffler AG. It's a Germany-based multinational component manufacturing firm. We are also joined by Mr. Rajiv Chhabra, Managing Director, MG Motor India. We also have Mr. N.K. Minda, Chairman and Managing Director, Uno Minda Group. We are also joined by Mr. Sarwant Singh, who is Chief Executive Officer, OHM Global Mobility, and President and Chief Planning Officer at Switch Mobility. We are also joined by Mr. Rohit Sabu, President and CEO of NBC Bearing. It's a CK Birla Group company and one of the leading automotive bearing manufacturer. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining ET Auto EV Conclave to discuss this important subject. So that's the panel today we have. I'm your moderator, Nabil Khan, editor, ET Auto. As the topic suggests, how are we going to manage the transition? Let me throw the first question to Mr. Minda. He was the past president of ACMA. Also, just want to understand auto component industry, which is about $57 billion industry when we talk about the peak revenue. Just want to understand, when electrification happens, a lot of parts will go away, but whatever parts will be used will become a bit costlier than earlier. It needs high precision. It needs to be light in weight. It should be noise free, or NVH controlled components will be required. In such a scenario, how do you see the Indian component industry will manage its value when we see the transition to electrification?
So thank you, Nabil. Thank you very much. First of all, I think, as we all know, the IC engine, will continue. Why I say IC engine will continue? We welcome EV, and we all know that EV will, with the pro policies of the government, EVs is going to grow. But overall vehicle volumes will grow by 2030 as well. So today we are, let's say, in 1890, which was our peak, 21 million two-wheeler, 4 million cars, PV, and electric, this CV and all. So overall volume are going to increase. We are estimating about 10 million PV. Of course, let's these 2 years, let's forget about the growth. But, and similarly, government with this has announced 40% in the car, 80% in the two-wheeler. That's the desire. We are all working towards that. So IC engine, there is a disruption by EV coming, but who are all the component manufacturers of IC engines will continue, and their volume will grow. Not to that extent. So they will definitely have a cake once the two-wheeler is expected to increase from 21 million to 40 million, let's say by 2030. So this is my intake input.
Crux of the matter, Mindaji, you are saying that the valuation will continue, as you see that there will be incremental growth on the ICE side. You accept that electrification will take place. That's how you are saying. Taking the discussion forward, Rajiv ji, just want to understand, you have rolled out a few electric products in car segment. Just want to understand, how do you see Indian component industry's capability to manage this transition? how much you think you will be able to localize going forward?
Naveen, thanks for that. I'll echo what Mr. Minda was saying, that for the foreseeable future, ICE and EV will coexist. But EV growth is definitely going to be much more than ICE in terms of percentage, not volumes, but the percentage growth. And every year you can think of doubling it at least, if not more. Obviously, you are starting from a small base. So now, there will be various impacts on various people, including the component manufacturers. So a lot of component manufacturers have raised their hands. They are actually getting some innovative solutions in parts. And I would say that because the government also has come out with this PLI scheme for even auto components. So to my information, lots of component manufacturers are interested in getting into electrical components. It's a journey, and initial period, in my opinion, 4 or 5 years are going to be gestation period. I don't have any doubt on capability of Indian auto components manufacturers that they can really produce good quality at reasonably good price components in India. And not only for India, also for export, the way they have done for the ICE components. So it's a question of that this journey is starting now. Volume is still less, but I'm seeing a lot of hands, getting raised now. A lot of people getting into it. And because in India, we have started making this noise, or we have started talking about it since last 2 years or so now, and it is becoming serious. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and I think our components player, in fact, I keep talking to ACMA guys, leadership and all, and in fact, we are supporting them. We have given them our EV cars to, just to understand, and they have got an institute in Sonipat, IIT Sonipat, ACMA has got, so we have given our cars to that institute. So I think a lot of work is going on, and I'm quite confident they can do a good job.
Thank you, Rajiv. I'll hear from you more on this. We'll like to hear some numbers in terms of localization. But before that, let me go to Dharmesh ji and understand from him. You are currently looking after the APAC market, where a part of the market has already transitioned to EV. When we talk about the volume, they have a reasonable volume now. India is going on that path. In this scenario, what would be your message? What are the area of your concern, and what would be your message to your counterparts in India? How should they handle this transition? How can they ramp up their localization efforts when we transition to electric vehicles?
Well, one thing which we all can agree is that the momentum and the pace of change has definitely quickened in the last 2 years, right? I mean, if I just look at our own view, which would also correlate with the view of the other panelists, 2 years ago we were predicting on a global basis, maybe we call it 30-30-40 scenario, where 30% might be electric vehicles, 30% will be hybrid, and remaining 40% might be ICE by 2030. In 2 years, we have upped the ante to make it 40-40-20. Which is 40% electric vehicles, 40% hybrids, and 20% ICE. Now, obviously, this is one number on a global basis, which cannot be applied to every country, every sub-regions, and so on, because the maturity level and the transition and the pace would be different, and also where they're coming from. So in the region now you talked about, when I look at in the region here, Japan, I think, we can all argue that they have been the leaders in hybrids for a long time, and hence maybe they are still, focused on the hybridization as the path forward. But I've also seen, very quick changes coming from their way on the electrification. And, Korea has been on electric journey already. Coming to India, and, what does it mean to us? I mean, I can just talk about, how are we approaching it. First of all, in the initial part, like Rajiv, you mentioned, maybe the business cases of this transition may not be very attractive. We know that, right? I think there is a hump to be crossed over. The volumes will be small. The upfront costs which you need to pay, investments into R&D, investments, the capex you need to pay for bringing that in, all of that needs to be paid for. So the first volumes, the first business cases may not be very attractive, but then I think all of us have to make that journey. We have to put that in, and the benefits that the government extends, or the help that the government extends, either on the supply side through the FAME, or rather the demand side through the FAME, and on the supply side through PLI would help. Let me just pause here. I can make some more comments in terms of how we are looking at this journey and making this transition successful.
Thank you, Dharmesh. I'll go to Rohit Sabuji now. Rohit Sabuji, you are one of the crucial component makers when it comes to automotive space. You make bearings. Just want to understand, and for that matter, Dharmesh also is in that space. Just want to understand what kind of technical change you expect in the products, and how are you going to address the challenge that will come probably in terms of a quality enhancement, in terms of you need to reduce the sound, you need to be lightweight, and all kind of complexity is going to come with electric vehicles, or when we transition to electric vehicles. How are you balancing the cost, because the volume is going to slowly increase. Right now it is not going to be a great volume, so how will you deal with this?
So thank you, Nabil. Actually, for the EVs, the bearing requirement is that it should be low noise, low friction, high RPM, with a material which will last long under these conditions. So we have been into this research for about 5 years now, and we have developed and are supplying bearings to many EV manufacturers in India and abroad. So the key thing is that the bearing can be developed. That is not an issue. It is just that we have to develop in such a fashion that the life expectancy is equal or more than the ICE, even with higher RPM and low tolerances. And the cost, as you mentioned, this thing. So right now, I can say that we meet in every parameter except for the cost part. The cost is slightly higher because of the inputs that are going into manufacturing of these kind of bearings.
Thank you, Rohit ji. Sarvan ji, I would like to bring you in here. You have a very rich experience. You have been consulting automotive industry in your earlier role. You have helped a lot of big gigs in the automobile sector. Now you are yourself leading a global future mobility company, or you can say electric mobility company. I just want to understand, you understand Indian auto component industry's prowess very well. How do you see this? These companies helping or transitioning itself to be the supplier for the global market also when we look at the electrification, because once local market progress to EV, it will be much more you can say better business case for them to export, also to supply overseas also. How do you see the preparedness, and what would be your word of caution to them, how they should progress?
Hi, Nabil, good question. So maybe let me use the example of my company to build this as a case. So we have come through, as you rightly said, we are a subsidiary of Ashok Leyland. We have put two different assets of Ashok Leyland. One which was in India, which was making electric buses, and then Optare in the UK, which was also making electric buses. So what we did is we took the two businesses and put that into a new company, and we call it Switch. And Switch is like an accelerated startup which already has over 300 electric buses on the road. Now, when we put the two organizations together, what we found is we were using different technology, we were using different voltages in two different parts of the market. We were sourcing components separately, one for our UK vehicles and one for our Indian vehicles. And what we are doing now is moving to our Gen 4 vehicles and buses. So it's interesting, we are already on Gen 4. And we are harmonizing the voltage, we are harmonizing the technology. So our objective is that all the vehicles that we make in Europe, so we are making buses in UK, we are also opening a new factory in Spain, and of course we have India. All these vehicles, for example, will be on a common electric vehicle architecture. So we will move to a 650 volt architecture, which means of course there will be differences, the comfort differences, some of the will be different, but the overall architecture, the base architecture of these vehicles is the same. So what that means, for example, is in some cases like our battery technology, we'll use standard NMC technology. Some of the power electronics, other architecture will be very standardized globally. And that's an opportunity electric vehicles bring. Although there will be local differences, overall, it will be very similar. So that allows the Indian suppliers to build components, both for the Indian market, but also for exports. So that's, to me, is one of the key opportunities. Of course, the opportunities are in, I think there are a number of opportunities in batteries and others, but for me, I believe one of the biggest opportunities in India is power electronics. There's a huge shortage of power electronics. Taiwan is traditionally known as the big country that was building some of these inverters. And going forward, I believe that's something that the Indian supplier industry can really pick up, both for India, but also for the global market. And again, I think I'd like to, when we talk about mobility in India, there's a lot of focus on two-wheelers, and I totally agree. Two-wheelers will go very quickly electric. And yes, I agree that the cars, because of the infrastructure issue, is different. But when it comes to commercial mobility, I think we are not evaluating the opportunity there. India, for example, CSL today from the Department of Heavy Industries is putting together a mega tender. It might be the biggest tender for buses. Over 5,500 buses will be sourced. The FAME to incentive scheme is really accelerating the development of electric buses in India. And given especially the pollution problems and also the TCO of these vehicles has a much more stronger business case than in passenger car market. So there's a huge opportunity to get into this market, I believe. So I think Yeah, we are very keen on sourcing locally. Of course, we are part of the PLI scheme, so we want to source locally, we want to build locally, and we are very much looking at the localized supply chain. Whenever we are talking to our suppliers, even if they're international suppliers, we're asking them to localize in India. Because we want to source in India. And of course, there's a huge incentive, both from a cost perspective, but also, it's much easier for us from a supply chain disruption we see to source locally in India.
Thank you, Sarvan. Rajiv ji, in your ICE product, we have seen you have adopted very high level of localization. How do you see this panning out for electric cars? Any target that you have?
Yeah, so definitely we have, and as you know that we have also applied for PLI schemes and we actually have qualified. Only thing is the formal letter has to wait because of this FDI issue. But we definitely are keen to go for that. And as per PLI scheme, 50% local add you need to do, local value add you need to do in the vehicles. And we are targeting more than that. So we are targeting 60%. So in the next 3 years, we want to do 60% local value add in India. So that's what our target is, which includes a lot of components, including battery assembly in India. We will have 2 cars by end of next year, EVs in our portfolio. One is ZS EV, and we have done a facelift yesterday only and relaunched it. And second EV, which we have announced we are launching next year, which will be 10 to 15 lakhs of rupees of range. And we are hopeful that we can sell 25% of our car as EVs next year itself. So out of our target is 1,20,000 total. Out of 1,20,000, we should sell 30,000 EVs next year itself. And we would have close to 55% to 60% local value add. So we are quite confident about that. And we are talking
impressive target, Rajiv ji. Can you tell me, you talked about 60% local content. Is it you are talking about in value term or the item term? Means
so as we are following I'm following the terminology what Government of India is using, local value add. So local value add is 60%, which includes your local assembly and paint shop and stuff like that. So, but in terms of components, you reduce it by almost 8 or 9%. So 60% becomes 50-51% approximately for components.
Okay. Minda ji, I just want to understand from you. Traditionally, we have seen our weak points have been the electronics, automotive electronics, motor and controller. These are going to be very important with the electrification taking up as we transition there. How do you see what are the steps that the Indian auto component industry is taking or your company is taking to manage this? Because this is going to be a great value addition when, as Rajiv ji also mentioned, that when we come to localization, these are very important component apart from cell manufacturing. Cell is another big ticket component, but these are motor controllers are very important and electronics. So how Indian manufacturers are working there?
So thank you, Nabil. Thank you once again. And as has been mentioned by Rajiv ji, Dharmesh ji and my colleague Sarvan ji, that, we all know in the EV is already in, and there are many new age OEMs have started production by importing components for this motor electronics from China. Even all these, CV manufacturers as well as Rajiv ji, they are all importing from China or the other country. But the acceleration has taken place in the two-wheeler and three-wheeler segment. And we as Minda, as you know, we have signed a JV agreement with a company called Frevo and started engaging with all the OEMs, rather started supplying to few of the OEMs our motor controller, which includes DC-DC converter, motor, charger, the controllers and the hooters in order to reduce the noise of the EV and all that. So these are the parts, and then some of the new innovation parts. So these are already accelerated in the localization, and I feel within next 2 years, not only we, there'll be many component manufacturers will be engaged in 2-3-wheelers, and will, the localization will take place. Coming back to the
what will be the current market size when you talk about these components in India, and how do you see it
as of now, the EV production of two-wheeler, three-wheeler is hardly 2 to 3% of the overall volume, but it is increasing. It is increasing.
No,
multi-fold.
I'm asking Aminda ji, the motor and controllers and component like this, how much does it constitute to the total revenue of the auto component industry?
I would say that other than the battery, these are the power electronics are the major consumers of the electric vehicles, the component names, what I told you. As far as the part of the auto component industry, we are in the initial phase. If you compare auto component industry with 56 billion, we are too far. So it is in the initial phase. It will grow over a period of time. We all know that maybe 50, 60, 70% two-wheeler will be by 2030 will be EV. Coming back to the next question of yours about the PV component and the CV, I'm very happy to hear Rajiv ji. I think the localization target of 60%, I think I should immediately catch hold of him and engage as soon as possible based on our competency of the two-wheeler. And Sarvanji also, he says, the common, the architecture, which is very good, initiative they are taking, because once we do this standardization, so as Dharmesh ji said, the economic of scale, when to invest, when to get return. So it will be expedite in this standard component can be there. So it is a chicken and egg story. When do we invest? But with the government, initiative of PLI and semiconductors are going to be localized in next 3 to 4 years. With all those initiatives, I am quite confident that we should be positive in localization of PV and CV component as well. Power electronics I'm talking about.
Thank you, Minda ji. Rohit ji, we have seen a lot of over a dozen states have come up with their policies around EV that addresses both supply side and demand side. How much do you think the industry can leverage that? How is it going to help? What are the key highlights that you see that will help manage this transition?
So right now, almost all the panel members have expressed that it is very initial stage, and also because the entire battery electronics is imported as of now till Mindaji starts production. As of now, it is imported, and therefore the cost of the vehicle, whether it is two-wheeler or four-wheeler, as compared to a ICE vehicle, is on the higher side. So the states and also the central government has given some incentives which are very minimal and do not impact that much that a normal person will be attracted towards the electric vehicle. Most of the people are buying electric vehicle because one, of course, it is efficient. Number two, there is too much noise around the country, and people have a belief that maybe ICE engine would be banned, or maybe something will happen, or there are so many stories that are going around this thing, and the government is not doing anything to quell these stories. So therefore, the electric market, whatever sales they are doing, they are doing. If you see the incentives outside, which essentially means in maybe Nordic countries, in Sweden, etc., they give up to 30% incentive, 25% incentive on the total value of the vehicle. That really makes it attractive. So for us, it is just a few thousand rupees here and there, which will not make it very attractive as of now.
So I say not adequate incentive. That's
Yeah.
that needs to be addressed by the state government. Dharmesh ji, how do you justify? Some people say that business cannot be driven by incentive. What's your thought? Because we saw in China also, when until the time this incentive was there, the volume was very high. The moment incentive started coming down, the volume started reducing. So how do you see this built up based on incentive?
Well, a solid business case, in my opinion, cannot be built entirely upon incentives alone. I think incentives are to get this going, to get this initial hump overcome, like I said earlier, right? At the end of the day, there has to be an economic business case for you and me to buy an electric car or electric bus or electric two-wheeler, whatever, right? And that's something I think we all are shooting towards. And I think what the governments can do is to facilitate everyone to get there ultimately. I think today, if you were to argue, I think two-wheelers or three-wheelers are almost there, right? I think there is a business case why anyone would already want to buy a two-wheeler or three-wheeler in a purely electric vehicle, electric environment. Buses, I think, Sarwant, you mentioned, I think the government is pushing very hard. And here we talk about city buses, which is to great extent, government funded. I think it's the privately owned cars, which is where I think we still have some gap. I think, we all have to admit there's still some gap in having a pure total cost of ownership through the life of a vehicle ownership. Somebody who drives, let's say, 10,000 kilometers a year. I'm not talking about somebody who drives 300,000 kilometers a year, right? For them, I think there's still a gap in terms of having that parity with the internal combustion engine. So in my opinion, incentives today are necessary, but whether incentive will forever drive electric vehicle, absolutely no. There has to be, and there will be, a pure business case of buying an electric vehicle.
Thank you, Dharmesh. Rajiv ji, just want to understand from you the challenge part that you see when we talk about electrification or transitioning to electrification specific to passenger vehicles. Still, the volumes are very less. We are doing about 2,000, 2,300, 400 units a month against over 300,000 of ICE engine. And we have seen the ICE engine degrowing, but some give an argument that it is also that people are moving to electrification. That's why the ICE engine volumes are going down. But electrification volumes are not going that up. What are the challenges that you see in immediate term? And there's another narrative that we saw that the battery cost was sliding, which is not the case now. We again see that the cathode chemistry cost is again increasing. So how do you see this impacting the transition going forward?
So I'm a convert on EV, okay? So I'm really biased, but in that spirit, take my comments. I see it in a totally different way. 2 years back, when we launched our ZS EV at 22-23 lakhs of rupees, the guys were really making fun of us, and the guys thought, why the hell are you launching this car? Because the whole market, the car market, was 2,000 cars a year. We got 2,000 bookings in 15 days. Right now, we are not able to supply, but we are getting 700 bookings a month. Okay, we are able to supply 200-300. Tata Nexon and Ultros, they're selling 2,000 a month, by the way. Okay, and I think they're also getting more orders than what they can supply. So actually, right now the market is around 3,000 cars a month. So it's not what you said. So 3,000 means 36,000, but no, because of chip shortages, we won't be able to supply. But this year should be around 30,000. Last year was maybe 15,000. Before that was 3,000-4,000. Next year, I hope normalcy restores. of chips and everything. So I am looking at a market of at least 70, 80,000 passenger cars next year. Okay. The biggest problem right now is we OEMs are not able to give choice to consumers. We have only 2-3 products, right? And the thing is, so OEMs have not taken it seriously, in my opinion. They are not able to give choice, number one. Number two, charging infrastructure is an ever-growing thing. Globally, it's evolving. India also is evolving. And by the way, 90% of our consumers, in fact, 95% of our consumers are charging the car at their home because we give a charger free with the car. You know, and they are do overnight charging for 6-7 hours a day. And then we have other things like we as OEM feel we are responsible to create even that. So we have got fast charger with Photom and Delta and Exicom. We are joining hands with some government agencies for superhighway chargers. We just announced 1,000 chargers, you know, at residential complexes. So, you know, I think if more OEMs join hand, I think it can be done at a faster pace. And the government is very clear. So, you know, I think there's a huge market for EV, and all the stars are getting aligned in that direction. The sustainability issue, the global issues, COP26, government policy, total cost of ownership for our ZS EV car, it is less than 1 rupee a kilometer. Whereas petrol and diesel now it's around 3.5 to 4 rupees. You know, so lots of guys actually are converting from a small car to a ZS EV because of total cost of ownership. Most importantly, let's not forget the customer's choice. You know, 2 years back, Nabil, you and I have been doing this thing since last 2-3 years, and probably, we have been skeptical about the whole journey. But, 2 years back, 3 years back, only 5 or 6% of consumers were looking at EV as an option. Right now, you take any survey, 40% of Indian consumers are looking for options in EV, and everybody's talking about it. So I think the biggest issue is choice. Very less choice from OEMs. That's the biggest challenge in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I meant the numbers are currently, I was talking about the monthly numbers, probably I got wrong there. About 2,500, 3,000 monthly number. Tata Motors is contributing 2,000 alone. Who had imagined that one OEM will do 2,000?
We can do 1,200 a month right now, but we are able to get only 300-400 allocation. So this year we will get an allocation.
How do you
of
see
6,000.
the constraint on the residual value of electric vehicle? That is also a big pushback for the customers. So how are you able to convince them?
So, there are 3-4 issues as we have to go through this journey, we have to handle. One would be, and these are all separate topics, okay? I'm just dropping it now. Just drop. There will be a different business case for dealers, by the way, for sales and after sales. After sales means their after sales revenue. How does it impact them when more and more EVs come into their portfolio? That's a separate topic altogether. Then let's talk about life cycle management of the battery. So can there be a case for repurposing and reusage of batteries? Or can you do urban mining and take the extract? So we at MG are trying to do and join hands with our ecosystem partners to try each and everything, usage, repurposes for village electrification, towers electrification, and things like that. And also we are able to retrieve, with the help of a partner, 99% of the minerals. We have done 2 batteries of ZS EV. So, then the financing of the battery as a service option, that's a separate topic altogether. Coming back to your residual value. Let's look around globally what's happening. When you had first generation of EVs, residual value was an issue. But when you look at new Leaf, new Tesla, and new other products, their residual value is more than the ICE residual value. These are the facts. Okay. So when you're talking about a new generation EV like ZS EV and like what we are going to launch next year, these are contemporary latest global batteries, global cars, and battery life cycle is much more than the vehicle in general. It's 12 years, right? So, and when the battery gets financed separately, so that's no longer an issue in future. But yes, if you have an old gen car, their residual value is pathetic in my opinion, and that's why people get biased.
Maybe just to add to that, Nabil, Rajiv is spot on. When the first generation electric cars came, they had not a very good residual value. But if you look at the residual value of electric vehicles today, Tesla is over 60%, almost touching 70% after 3 years. Typically, residual values tend to be 40 to 60. Anything over 60 after 3 years is a big boon. And, I've been driving a Tesla, like an electric car like Rajiv, and I've never taken it to service. So that's the challenge, right? How do you maximize? And another thing I saw in Europe, which I'm sure will come to India. The OEMs start controlling the second life. Toyota ran a hybrid reconditioning plan where they bought the hybrids back, the Priuses back, reconditioned it, put a Toyota seal and put it back in the market. That increased the residual value and it increased their market share in it. So I think all of these things is a matter of time before they start coming in.
So do you think the battery price rise that is expected, that is happening now, will that be contained anytime soon, or how do you see that?
So if you ask me, Nabil, I think it's a short
have an
term.
impact on the cost or pricing of electric vehicles going forward?
I think in the short term, because of geopolitical issues, chip shortage, supply chain issues, I think there is and then now that the whole issue with Ukraine conflict, this is all causing major issues in terms of supply and demand. Lead times have gone up tremendously. So there is a big issue. But if you look at the amount of battery manufacturing and cell manufacturing capacity that is being put in, and also when you break it down in the past, it was mainly centered in Asia, mainly in 3 countries. But going forward, India will build it. Europe is building mega capacity. Likewise, we are seeing huge capacity come in. So I think it's a matter of time. I mean, we see that prices currently are around $100 to $130 to $150. They will, within the next 2 to 3 years, start coming down below $100. So, I think the path, and now I think the blessing with the Ukraine issue is, I shouldn't say that, but the oil prices have gone up. So that is pushing you even more towards electric. And in countries like India, where sensitivity is so high, it will push the consumer more to think about electrification.
So, Dharmesh, what's your thought? Because I have seen that the battery chemistry price, raw material price is also shooting now.
I want to take that, that's a perfect segue, that definitely the push towards the electrification will be even higher, right? As geopolitically, now countries try to reduce their dependence on oil even further. Now for, suppliers like us, who work with the OEMs like Sarwant and Rajiv here on the panel, I think for us it's important as to how do we make this transition quickly or quicker than we had ever planned. And for me, you asked earlier the question, what can I advise or what can I, ask my fellow supplier colleagues? I think there are tremendous amount of technology, competence, capital, required to make this transition and make this transition successfully. And for that, one thing that we need to do, first of all, is to make sure our current business is very, very robust, which means, we have to put a lot more emphasis on operational excellence, make it super competitive so that it can generate the cash which is necessary for you to continue to invest and quickly invest into this transition. So that's number one that I really look at, from my own businesses, and I can only advise all my colleagues that we do even better than we ever have done in the past. Now, coming to the future supply chain, yes, of course, we have seen some recent, developments which puts even more challenges on EV supply chain. What is it? I mean, it's about rare earths, it's about magnets, it's about chips and the power electronic components, battery cells, and so on. Most of it, which is not produced in India today, at least, right? I think that's what we need to drive at. What does it mean now? How do we make this transition, right? How does it come into the region? The good part is this transition also means a tremendous big opportunity. Nabil, you asked how big the market is. I remember, I think one of the studies said by 2030, EV could be about $200 billion already, right? So that's a big market we are talking about. And there is definitely a big attraction to get there and get there quickly.
Thank you, Dharmesh. Rohit ji, I just want to understand the PLI scheme. Let's go back there. PLI scheme gives largely advantage to the big ones. A lot of small ones, Indian component industry largely, have smaller players. How do you see this? Would you have expected something different in the PLI, or how do you see that the big ones hand-holding with the smaller ones to take long in this transition?
Yeah, the PLI scheme is a little complicated for the small players to take advantage of. One, because it is capacity and production based. over and above a certain range, and it is industry based in the sense that what industry you are addressing to. So it is very good for OEMs and for large auto component manufacturers who are moving towards EV, etc. The tier 2, tier 3 manufacturers, I don't think will be able to take advantage of this unless and until they are handheld with the OEMs. So you are right in saying that I don't think they will be able to fully take advantage of this.
Okay, Mindaji, your thought on this? Are you trying to build a bridge when you can take along your MSMEs and the smaller players to take advantage of this?
Yeah. I am totally in agreement with Rohit and to you also that the OEMs and the large auto component, there are about 100 applications from the component side. So maybe government will approve maybe 30, 40. We are still in the process of the approval as far as the component manufacturing is concerned. But we all have to work in an ecosystem. Somewhere we get, somewhere the OEM will get, and tier 2, 3, in order to localize and cost-effective solutions to the country, to the OEMs, and thereby so that they can be competitive. They don't need to be import from China. China have economic of scale. The very purpose of this PLI scheme and the FAME 2 is to, as the Major said, the initial stage of incentivization to promote all of us. And then so that we can make an ecosystem cost effective, and OEM should pass it on the benefit to us and we to the tier 2 and tier 3, as Rohit ji said.
Sarvanji, what's your thought on this?
I don't think I'm an expert to comment on it. From a OEM perspective, I can say it's definitely very helpful. I think it's supportive, and I think, like rightly Mr. Mindaji said, the fact it allows the disadvantage that we have in India of not having scale, I think it very much supports that, and I think it focuses us to localize.
As an OEM, how do you think you can help these small players who constitute about 80% or even more of the entire component industry in India? That means if, because there is a huge advantage in the PLI that will be taken up by only the biggies, then again, this large number of member of the industry will be left behind. So in such
I don't think so. Yeah, so I think the benefits will come top down is what I see it. When the OEMs localize, they have to source local components. That's a key part of the scheme. So, we will be looking to build and leverage our local supply chain. In particular, as you know, with Ashok Leyland and Switch, one of the reasons we produce, such competitive products in India is because we localize and we have a very strong local supply chain. So, our hope is, as an OEM, that same local supply chain will also support us with electric components.
Rajiv ji, what's your thought?
Yeah, see, we need to understand the overall perspective that localization in any case makes a lot of sense, because in terms of imports now, the rupee volatility, the freight volatility also adds to a lot of supply chain disruptions, right? So it makes a lot of sense to buy it locally. I agree with Sarvan, it has to come from top down, but let's understand it's not going to be easy even for OEMs to do, because you need to do minimum 50% value add to get qualified for incentives under PLI scheme. You may get the approval from the government, but every year there will be an audit, and you need to show that how you have localized and how much value you're adding before you start getting any money from the government. So it's not going to be easy. Having said that, I think I totally agree with Mr. Minda that it's a part of the ecosystem. We have to all depend on each other. No one person can do the job. So when you are doing the work with tier 1 and tier 1 does with tier 2 to tier 3, we need to hold hands. As Dharmesh said, initial 4 or 5 years are going to be crucial. Good thing is the government is very clear that they want to promote localization. So they have made some schemes. Now they cannot do everything for everyone in one go. Right? So they have done for OEMs and tier 1s, let's say, to start with. Now we need to take care of tier 2 and tier 3 together, and we need to get into this journey. I think that There is no time now to keep debating about is it good or is it bad. This is a reality. Okay, this is inevitable. This is going to happen. So let's support each other and get on to this journey.
And if I,
Okay,
if I may add,
Maybe,
Nabil,
maybe
Nabil,
Nabil, sorry, Dharmesh, go ahead, please.
well, I just wanted to add that, the whole supply chain obviously is becoming very, very integrated. And during each one of these geopolitical disruptions, we have discovered that we are far more intertwined than we ever were. I think this whole e-mobility journey, I think there is more expected from the tier one suppliers like us to do for the OEMs. And, we have limited resources just like the OEMs, right? So we need to then work with our tier twos that they need to put up their capabilities. We need to give more of tasks to them. And they need to do the same for the next years and so on. So in my opinion, this journey, everyone gets to benefit because there is more expected at each tier level than we were doing in the past.
Yeah, Mindaji.
So just I was complimenting to Dharmesh ji and Rajiv ji and Sarvan ji that, perhaps one of the idea, let's say the OEM gets 10% incentive on the PLI. So they can give it to tier one, maybe 6%, 5%, and then tier one can give to tier two, maybe 4% something. And year on year kind of reduction on the basic prices is one. Could be one of the idea, so that the tier one, tier two, and tier three are all motivated, and it becomes an ecosystem that depending upon the scale, economic of scale, and depending upon the volume, and then the localization speed, because there are going to be a huge investment as well,
So now we are running out of time. I'll just take one or two final questions. One question to all of you. Now we see that the COVID, which had a very long lasting impact, I hope, I wish that it is now about to go. And I think things will come back to normalcy, and which is going to drive a lot of demand for the ICE as well as EV. In such a scenario, when the demand for ICE engine or traditional vehicle also increases, in such a scenario, how do you see what kind of the disruption or disturbance you think will be in the supply chain? And what would be your advice how to manage? What would it to be? How will it to be managed? Because the new B probably, which is electric vehicle, may not be left behind as the rush for demand or rush of demand comes in place after COVID. I'll start with you, Rajiv ji.
Yeah, you come from one problem, get into another problem. And I heard a comment from somewhere that, and I like that, when COVID happened, we said we are into a new normal situation. Now, one of these eminent personalities said, actually, it's nothing called new normal, it's never normal. So we are in a world of never normal, because from COVID, hopefully we're getting out, as you said, but we are getting into another geopolitical tension, right? And we don't know, none of us knows how will it pan out and what's the impact, short term, long term, it depends on how long does it go. So, and then we know the issues about the metal prices going up. Freight is unbelievable. One container of $600 pre-COVID is now $8,000. Post-COVID, right? So, and the metal prices, we know, the inflationary issue, we know. So we don't know whether it's going to be a huge growth or it's going to be stagflation or recession in most part of the world. We don't know, and then the central government policies. So the whole thing is we cannot control that. We don't know. So I think every organization, including us and everyone, has to be very, very agile, flexible, very efficient. Goes back to what Dharmesh was saying. Whatever we are doing, we need to make sure it's very efficient, very productive, less waste. And that's what is very common sense. Go back to the basics, because we don't know what will happen next day. So
yeah, your thought. 30 seconds. Sarvanji, your thought.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so Nabil, one very interesting, you mentioned in my previous life, I remember doing some modeling, and we looked at what is the peak of the auto industry after a recession? And it was always 3 to 4 years. The auto industry is very resilient. It rebounds very strongly. So, one thing I can say, whenever these geopolitical issues get resolved, there will be a rebound. The second thing I think, when I look at the Indian auto industry, let me just take the example of buses. India sells 40,000 buses a year, compared to China, which sells 130,000 buses a year. Now, if you look at the infrastructure in India and China, Indian infrastructure is terrible compared to China infrastructure, but we still sell so many low number of buses. Now, urbanization rates in India are going up. So first thing that makes me always think is, when will India become China? Maybe it won't sell 133,000 units a year, but can India sell 80,000 units a year? And I think same for the passenger cars. India is selling 4 million. When will India sell 6, 8, 10 million vehicles? So I think what I see is over the next 10 years, with the Indian GDP, the way it's growing, even if it grows at 6%, India will become third largest economy. That means Indian auto sales will grow and will start reaching those levels which we needed to see. And that means there is a big demand coming. So when I talk to component suppliers, I think we are talking about the big shift to electric, but there is also going to be a big shift to demand. And where we are sometimes conservative in India is not making that dynamic decision of putting more capacity in. And I think that's something I would recommend the Indian component manufacturers to seriously think, that somewhere down the line in the next 10 years, that peak will come and that peak will continue. And you need to start looking at building capacity in the country.
Thank you. Yeah, Mindaji, your thought.
So I am in agreement with Rajiv ji mainly that, we have many challenges, as we know about, starting from semiconductor. It is not only the semiconductor shortage, it is, I would say, that kind of a, rationing, or maybe twisting your arm sometime by the distributor or the manufacturer. It's not really a shortage. And the commodity price increases, and this, with this Ukraine effect, we don't know where are we heading. So at this particular moment of time, my suggestion would be that we have to look at the daily work management. We have to watch the situation daily. Maybe defer some, special initiative which we are taking by 1 quarter. Look at your fixed cost should not increase, because not only the challenge of semiconductor and commodity increase and containers, attrition is also one of the major, I don't know, we have been seeing that the global attrition is increasing also in India. So with that, quarter on quarter watch, month on month watch, and the keyword Rajiv ji said, agility and speedy action, speedy decision making, whatever we can do, but not, not only considering the short term, we have to keep mid-term and long term in mind, as Sarvan ji said.
Yeah, Rohit ji, what's your thought? Especially, do you think the shortage of semiconductor is already there? Do you think further the shortage of other component will also come into play?
See, if you, Nabil, if you see the history of the, especially the Indian auto component industry, as Mr. Rajiv and Mr. Sarvan was saying, that capacity should be added in advance. And Indian auto industry has always envisaged the good times or the high production and invested in time. So, and this is a cyclical industry, and we all know that. And right now, if you see a slightly longer time frame, not the immediate time frame, because a lot of things are happening right now. If you see a slightly longer time frame, we are in for fairly good times. We have been in a little down in the last 2 years. We are in for fairly good times, and most of the Indian component industry has invested for the future. Number two is whether it will affect, whether your initial question was whether the increase in demand of ICE will affect the supply of components to EV. Yeah, but if you see the main components of the EV are independent of the ICE, so they will be very different. They will have different capacities for the EVs. So yes, of course, there are a few things which are common. For example, like our bearings, the lines are common. The bearings are different, but the lines are common. So it may or may not impact. But Mindaji can answer this better. But I think in the history of Indian auto industry, we have never failed our OEMs.
Okay, Dharmesh, your thought.
Well, I think everything has been said so well. I mean, I can again say what we are doing. Yes, we are looking at our flexibility, how our plants can respond quicker to the changes which are happening, how we can be more agile. Again, the resilience piece. Where are the parts coming from? What happens? And that's where the scenario planning comes in. We work with scenarios now. We don't have one plan. We have one plan. We have second plan. We have a third plan. All of them available at once, and you hopefully can just pull that out. So scenario planning has become extremely important. And last piece, I don't think this is the time to slow down on your investments. At least that's my advice. We are not slowing down. I think the India story is very much intact. The demand very much is there, and this is not the time to slow down.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. That was a lovely discussion. What comes out that there could be a problem as the industry had put a pause on the investment or capacity expansion. If the demand roars back, the industry needs to be agile, and they need to see that how do they manage it in a shorter time. Thank you so much once again for joining ET Auto panel discussion on nut bolts managing the transition to electrification. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, panelists, for delving deep into the discussion and imparting some meaningful insights. Dear viewers, use the hashtag ETAutoEVC in all your social media insights while sharing the session highlights.